Well, it's great to be back, and I appreciate you all being here. And I hope you've had a chance, even if briefly, to see Claire's exhibition. So when we have our conversation, you can try and remember some of the things that you've seen already. We're hoping that we'll break a little early and go back into the show. And then if you have other questions, if you want to stay, then Claire may be able to converse with you about those. But I want to thank the museum for keeping me involved and for allowing me to do this really wonderful exhibition. We have staff that have helped so much with the exhibition, and I want to thank you and Mike too for just a great team that puts shows like this together, and I think Claire echoes that. There is a catalog for the exhibition, but the catalog will come out in maybe 3 weeks, we think, something like that. And it has an essay in it by Emily Shinn. But you may also know Emily because she wrote essays for Matthew Picton's show last year, as well as for the Glenn Brown exhibition that we had, I don't know, 2 years ago maybe, and the Leger exhibition and various other projects. So we're just thrilled that she can stay with us for now and is doing really great things. And the catalog does have all the works in the exhibition in it, an artist statement, an interview with Claire, and it's another beautifully designed project by Mike. So look for that. There are some flyers around that you can pick up to remember that. So we're just going to start in on this. And I should also say the exhibition and the publication is made possible by the Hartz Fund for Contemporary Art. So projects like this are only possible because of additional support that the museum receives. So keep that in mind if you're thinking of making a donation. So shall I do the first one, and we're just going to banter back and forth. So would you tell us a bit about your background, how you became an artist, where you grew up, and how art entered into that?
I was born in London, 1971, and I've lived all over the British Isles, but basically wherever there's a nuclear submarine base, because my father was in the Navy, and that's usually in places that are in sort of hidden away, and there's deep water, basically, and mountains. I went to boarding school when I was 11, and that was in a place called Somerset, which is very beautiful, very different from Scotland, which is where the nuclear submarine bases are. So, yeah.
Right. And then for your schooling, because I think you've always said you were kind of allowed to be in nature, draw, kind of explore your own interests, but you're also really smart. So
I hope so.
In addition to being a great artist, so tell us a little about your schooling.
Okay, so I went to Oxford. I studied fine art and history of art, and that was a real privilege. We studied all the different disciplines, sort of fine art drawing, anatomy. We had a surface dissected corpse, so you could really get in there, and it was very memorable. And then after that, I decided to go to a proper art school, and I went to Camberwell College of Art and Design, and very pragmatically decided to do printmaking, because that's multiples, and as an artist, to make a living, it's always good if you can multiply your work. So, yeah.
So when you, as a professional artist, do you make work for yourself or more for others?
That's really easy to answer, Emily, because I always do it for myself. I don't think you can think about doing anything for other people, especially as an artist, because you very much live in your own separate universe, and trying to create for others, for me, certainly would be impossible. And I don't feel like my work is more of a sort of outward communication, like lots of political work or even Matthew's work that's about history and politics and pulling things together. It's more a kind of communication with my internal being. So, yeah.
So when you were still in England, you were making sculptural work, and I mean, it was very different than what you're doing now. And so you moved to Ashland, Oregon in 2010, I think, you and Matthew, and your work changed. So would you talk about why that happened?
Well, when you move 6,000 miles and change cultures and change everything, you can't stay the same. And if your work as not an artist particularly is about your internal world, then it's going to change completely. So I think what happened is I just had a complete dislocation from my past life. And I spent the first year probably doing no work, which Matthew, I remember, was quite worried about. And I just went for long walks and completely reassessed my practice and sort of came back into touch with things maybe that existed more in my childhood, especially a love of nature and drawing and being outdoors and being still and not distracted by living in a big city. So it all changed, yeah.
Do you find that that smaller trips influence you, international travel to different places or even places around Oregon or in the United States?
I find travel is one of the most inspiring things. It's good to live somewhere that really supports you, but it's good to leave it because then you get a whole different appreciation when you come back. But it's also good to pick things up on the way. Like recently we went to Iceland, and that has started a whole obsession with things that grow close to the ground and things that, it's hard for things to survive in such a harsh environment, and it's really fascinating on all levels. So yes, it's very important. And also another trip, I love forests, as you might notice from my work, and we always try and visit somewhere with really beautiful trees, and Tobago, that was incredible because it's pristine rainforest that's never ever been touched or altered, and you can walk in it because there are no poisonous snakes. So I like that.
Perfect place. So when you see your work in the exhibition and you realize the amount of incredible detail that it has, I'm wondering whether you're focused on one work at a time, or do you have a few different examples going that you're working on, or how do you get into your work, and how long does it take to create a piece?
I'm one of these people that can't multitask, so I just work on one piece. I've tried working on several, and it's interesting, I can't put myself under any pressure at all. I can do sketches and take lots of photographs, but essentially I can only work on one thing. I'm not quite sure why that is. But
And like one of the larger pieces, like Homeostasis,
yeah.
How long would that take to make?
Drawings take a very, very long time. I think that piece took, and I was working, I want to say 8 to 10 hours a day. Matthew, how long did that take? Was it like 3 months, 4 months? I don't know.
Put in like 6 weeks of sort of long weeks on it, and then prior to that you'd probably done another sort of 4 weeks of
Yeah.
preparation and smaller amounts of work.
Yeah, so it was
it's
very,
about
very
3
long time.
months.
But I have actually spent 8 months on one drawing. Yeah, it took a really long time. I don't know, I don't count the days. It'd be like being in prison. Yeah.
And how do you start on a work? Do you work from a structure or from pattern, or how does that kind of feature in your work?
The way I start is always doing preliminary sketches, and then choosing the size and then I do a structure, so interlocking circles, and working out lots and lots of different shapes within that. So sometimes it can be, I don't know, I try and put every geometry possible, abstract geometries, and then I start laying the forms on. And it's a very intuitive process because I think if you plan anything too much, for me it would be really boring executing it. So there always has to be many elements of chance. Otherwise, I'll probably just give up.
So I guess I want to turn a little bit to what the work's about. In terms of the title of the show is Pathways to the Invisible, which kind of implies that it's more than just nature, even though we start with nature. And I'm wondering if you could, I don't know how you put it in words, because I know part of it is an intuitive, practice in some ways. But how would you say it's connected between nature and where you take the pathways to the invisible, or we do?
Yeah. I picked that title because I was reading Bruce Chatwin's songlines, and I'm very moved at the idea of, the world being sung into creation. And I like to think of the drawings as the world being kind of drawn into creation. So it's from the invisible. It's often, starting a drawing, I'm just being silent. It's a kind of meditation, and I don't really know how it's going to be in the end. Like, none of us really know how our lives are going to end up. So it's just pulling things from the essence into reality, the material world, the drawing. It's extremely hard to put into words without sounding a little bit funny. So I kind of need someone like Emily to write about it, and she has written about it very eloquently in her essay. I mean, it's an interesting process. It's an ongoing process. It's one that I'm opening up to all the time. So, but the almost, and it also speaks of how there's a cycle of, birth, death, rebirth. You see that in nature. It's a beautiful thing to tune into, because then you can just live in a very comfortable way. Yeah. So.
There seems to be a lot of, you talked about cycles, and there seems to be some kind of dichotomy as well in terms of visual, but maybe thematic. A lot of the works are paired, maybe with light and dark, night and day, but maybe also philosophically as well. Can you talk about how you think about that?
I really like the idea of going from one extreme to the other and then back again. We live in this incredibly paradoxical world of everything has its opposite. So, a starting point of from white to black, and then from black to white, and everything along the way. I just love the balance. So it's a little thing I play with, and I love the sort of diptych, two sides. Yeah, it's just kind of seems right.
I mean, it also seems like, whether you want to talk about yin and yang, or the actual forces, or the one that becomes many, or however you want to talk about that. But I see that as operating in these pieces or through you in these works, so that you have these balances.
Yeah, that's exactly right, Jill. That's it. I don't put it into words, because there's Confucius has already done that, and so I'm always thinking about those things. Yeah.
I think a lot of us are.
Yeah.
Okay, so much of the work the works in the show are graphite or colored pencils or inks. And then there's the wallpaper. Mm-hmm. So can you talk about the process of how you decided to think about or doing wallpaper, and what, how that fits in some ways?
Well, as an artist, it gets, when you've done quite a few shows, the feeling and space of the gallery is always similar. You know, white walls, and then you make things to go on the walls. And when I'm at home, you know, we put all our work up on the walls and all sorts of other things. And it was actually an exhibition at Nancy's gallery. And I just love the idea of really sort of being honest and pulling everything that I really do and how I really like seeing my work into the gallery. So, and I wanted to do a really big drawing because sometimes these white walls can really shrink the work, and at home you're living in a smaller scale. And I wanted it to somehow feel as it did in my environment. So the infinitely big drawing that you can make with wallpaper, the repeating pattern, and then placing works on top, and then placing found objects with it, and creating that kind of immersive environment was very satisfying. And yeah, I just really like the way it looks. And if I was given the chance, I would probably create floors and ceilings and all of it. Yeah, and I like the idea of, you know, I know lots of people are into minimalism, but I'm not particularly, and I think it's wonderful to bring nature into your home, and since, you know, it decays, it's good to record it on wallpaper. Yeah.
So let me just follow that up with, so then that leads into, I know that you have an appreciation for arts and crafts, the arts and crafts movement. So I think that makes a lot of sense when thinking about how you are creating these environments and how everything you're living with is in fact something that you've made or curated into that environment, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I've always loved the arts and crafts movement. One of the houses I lived in when I was, I don't know, 5, 6, had some William Morris wallpaper. And I particularly liked that room because it was like being inside nature. And, you know, whenever I go to London, I visit the Victoria and Albert, and I always go and see all the arts and crafts. There's something so satisfying about the approach where it's in everything. Function and art meet so perfectly, and I really appreciate that. And it's the same with the Wiener Werkstatt. Matthew and I went to Vienna, and it's absolutely stunning work, yeah.
The wallpaper on view in this exhibition has images of medicinal plants, and as do a few of the other works in the exhibition. Can you talk about how you came to be enamored with medicinal plants and why you like them?
Okay, well, my grandfather was actually a horticulturalist, and I spent quite a lot of time staying with my grandparents when I was young. And obviously, I think he passed on to me sort of a love of plants. And my mother also is very much into herbs and plants and has always been a fantastic gardener. And when I got to Oregon, I realized that it's such an amazing environment there. And I don't have time to garden. So although we have a big garden, we've got some land, it was interesting to see what grew there. And I came to realize that many of the plants you could eat, and many of them had great medicinal value. And I got interested in drying them, collecting them, eating them, making tinctures. You can do all sorts of things with them. Yeah, I don't know. It's great.
And it's kind of, given the colors of them too, it's sort of mysterious and kind of makes you want to know what you're looking at more. Kind of it draws you in. So, titles of your work. Some of them are very straightforward, and others are like, where did that come from? You know, there's Laocoon, there's Homeostasis. Can you talk a little bit about how you go about titling work?
Titling work has got easier for me because I don't make so many pieces. I just concentrate on really big drawings. But yeah, titles, it's very important. I think a title can really make or break a work of art. It can really put someone off it, or it can really invite them into it. So I'm very thoughtful when I title the work. I always start with a working title, and I'll write it down, and it might be something like lichen drawing. As you'll see in the show, that didn't change. It just stayed, lichen drawing. But something like homeostasis, that came to me. I think often I will think, before I go to bed, I think I'd like to title this, and when I wake up, the title is usually there. So it's a kind of command that I give myself. And there's one called individuation points, and I called it that because the beginning of the drawing was quite simply just making a red dot right in the middle of the page. And to me, it felt like a sort of egg, a beginning, the individuation of creation. I don't know. Anyway, it stayed. So the title was there before the work was, which is really unusual. But, titling, it's very important.
Okay.
Yeah.
Going back to your academic studies, you studied both art and art history. What artists or movements have influenced or continue to influence you? And do you look at other artists' work, past or present, when you are in the process of creating work?
I always look at art. Wherever I am, I go and see as much as I can. And Matthew and I have a great collection of art books. We collect catalogues. So many books. And whenever I start a drawing, I almost see them as kind of mentors. I'll pull out, like for the trees, the nocturnal life of trees. I pulled out David Hockney, and I pulled out some pre-Raphaelites, and actually some Finnish painters. And, I often have collections of books. So, yes, I have them all out helping me. And it's not so much copying the technique. It's something to do with, it's almost like feeling the support. Like actually with that one, there's he was a Swedish prince. He's called Prince Eugene, and he did a painting called Forest. And although it looks nothing like my piece of work, I was kind of trying to feel the essence of that, yeah. So it's very important, yeah. And actually, I have many favourite artists, but usually it's a favourite painting, like, Odeon Redon, who we both like, know that. That's one that's lasted. So he was one of the first artists that I liked as a child, and I still really like his work, so that's quite unusual.
It's a hard one to like as a child. That's surprising. So one of the great benefits of being in Ashland is that Claire and Matthew Picton live there, and many of you saw Matthew's show here last year, so you know his work. And they both have studios in their home, which is kind of on top of one of the hills, so that you have this kind of wild backyard, and you're kind of able to look at that, and Matthew's down in the basement, like cutting away, doing all these other things. But I wonder what it's like when you have two visual artists with really strong ideas of what you're doing, working in the same proximity. Your work's very different, but how do you either influence or, advise each other in some ways?
Well, I think there's only one thing that's similar about our work, and that's that we're both really OCD. And that's good enough. That's enough crossover. And that means we can really help each other because we both have such an attention to detail. And I would say that Matthew is my tutor. He will come and tell me the truth, and I will do the same to him. And we say things that nobody else would say, like remove the top half of that drawing. Things that, so it's very helpful being married to another artist, and it's actually a great privilege. You have someone on hand to help you. And Matthew's been very good at educating me about American art, because when I moved here 9 years ago, I knew famous American artists, but there was so much, and there is so much I have to learn, so I have him to thank for that. It's very good.
You are currently completing a major Percent for Art commission for Western Oregon University, and 2 of those pieces are actually on view in the show. Would you tell us about that project and the themes and subjects that you're exploring through that?
Okay. yeah, it's an absolutely amazing commission. It's a whole building, natural sciences building, and there's 2 wings to the building. There's the biology wing and the earth science and physics wing, and then a long corridor in between. So I have 6 drawings, 2 of them very large, 8-foot by 4-foot drawings, and they're actually allowing me to design a wallpaper for them, which I'm thrilled about. And so it's kind of my dream commission, I have to say. And I have the biology down. I've done that. And I actually have a meeting with one of the professors on the telephone on Friday, because earth sciences is my weak point. So it's good. It's good. It's really going to expand my horizons, I think. And yes, I have to find a visual pathway in which will interlink all the earth sciences and physics. I've got some ideas, but I'm definitely going to need some pointers. So, yeah.
We'll have to all go up and see the works when they're done.
Yeah.
That would be great. Do you like doing commissions or having a, like, do this, or rather than just doing your own thing?
When I was younger, I did some commissions, and I had a lot of trouble with them because I didn't like being told what to do. But now I'm older, I actually love commissions, and I like almost like a constraint or something, boundaries to work within. I think it's challenging in a good way. So I would say I really do, yeah, like commissions, yeah.
And you said this new commission is kind of an ideal project, and you mentioned kind of really immersive environments as well. Do you have an ideal project if you had full control over everything?
Well, I was musing the other day how a drawing I would like to do is of a whole tree. And now we have the technology where you could use a drone and take photographs all the way up from the crown of the tree all the way down and use that as research. And I have this megalomaniac idea that I could do a drawing that was about 7 stories tall, maybe in an atrium of a whole tree. That's my fantasy project.
I'd also like to just give you a small house and tell you to take it over.
Yeah.
I think that would be
Or
really
a cave.
good.
That would be
cave?
nice, yeah.
All right, that's possible too. So we could keep going, but do any of you have questions? Because we're happy to open that up before we move. Jim?
I haven't had a chance to spend much time in the gallery yet, but I noticed you have a large cabinet with a lot of artifacts in the cabinet. Could you say a few words about how you use the materials that you're sketching and drawing? Do you bring it in the studio when you can? You mentioned photographs. You can't bring a 70-foot tree inside. You use those a lot. You do this to replicate the anatomy of the object that you're trying to draw?
I collect things mainly for the colours, and I try not to take too much because I only take things that I know are totally dead and it wouldn't disrupt, the ecology to take it away, or things that sometimes it's things I know I'm not even going to draw, like a bird's nest. I haven't done any bird's nest drawings yet, but I'm thinking about doing it. Yeah, it's very inspiring to have these objects around you. Photographs are good, but I think you really need the object there. Often the other senses like touch are very important when you're studying something. It communicates something else. So, for instance, I'll have lots of pieces of lichen lying all over the drawing when I'm drawing lichens. Or even just acorns, anything. I go outside and pick things up and bring them back in. It helps.
I was just curious, some of the pieces in the gallery are quite large as drawings go. And physically, how do you handle that? Do you have it flat on a table, on an easel, on a drawing table? And how does that influence the image?
Well, yeah. So when they're really, really large, I have to have them flat on the table. But periodically I will elevate it so I can see what it's going to look like. But having a substructure like the interlocking circles underneath is really helpful because it helps you balance the composition. If I didn't have that, it would be like doing a giant doodle that I would have kind of no control over the balance.
Have you tried that?
Yes, I have. It took a really long time.
So Claire's got a studio room off the kitchen, kind of, that with a big table. So
Yeah.
you can, it doesn't fit the whole thing, I think, completely, but it moves around.
Yeah.
But you can move around the table, too.
Yeah, I move around the table. Sometimes I sit on top of it, and sometimes I put it all on the floor. Yeah, it's good.
Yeah, the works convey the vitality and integrity and beauty of all kinds of life, which now is under a threat. I wonder if you've ever thought about doing damaged nature or something that upsets your sensibility in a way. We see it all around us now, and I'm wondering if that's ever you ever thought about doing something like that.
Well, you know, it's funny because I don't worry about nature. I worry about human beings. You know, nature, if you look at what happens in an oil spill, you know, they'll clean the oil up with chemicals, and the lichens will grow back within 5 or 10 years, which is just a blip, you know. So I think nature's, it's probably not a fashionable thing to say, but from what I've noticed, it's going to be fine. But there is beauty in the decay, and you know, I'm not really trying to send a message out there. There's lots of people doing that very eloquently. I'm just focusing on how it thrives. Yeah.
Could you speak, you have your smaller images, they're up in the front part that are dark and they're luminescent. And could you talk about what that vision is? Are they mushrooms or forest or lichens or?
Yeah. So they're based on, that's the mycelium too, the small, yeah. That was a study. So I picked some mushrooms, and because they're okay, that's like picking the fruit, you know, like picking an apple off the tree. So I picked them, I studied them, I watched them decaying, and I kept working on the drawing. Even a small drawing like that will take about a week or something. And it just has a kind of life of its own. So.
You said there's some that are luminescent, as if it was bioluminescent.
Oh, yeah.
in the forest.
Yeah. Okay, so yeah, in the forest, in the redwoods actually, there are bioluminescing mushrooms. Obviously you have to go there at night to see them, and I haven't actually managed to do that yet. But I don't actually make up the colours in the drawings. So, you know, when you see the drawings with the bright sort of fluorescent yellow, that actually exists in nature, so does the orange. Yeah, I'm aware of it.
Yeah, I think something that I've noticed since knowing your work and seeing it is how much more attention I pay to nature that I'm in, and realizing that the colors are there if you look for them. You know, like that yellow-green is really a bright yellow-green.
Yeah, it's all there, especially in the lichens. Yeah.
Any other questions? Okay, I think what we can do for those who want to stay, and we won't all fit in there obviously, but with patience we will do this, is go to the gallery and then look and see if you have questions, and Claire will be here for at least another 15 minutes or more, right?
Yes. Happy to answer any questions.
But let's thank her for the exhibition. Thank you.